Shalom. This week we are reading Parshat Beshalach. As if it's not enough to read about the splitting of the sea, in this week's Parsha we also learn about food from heaven, bread from heaven. And we read, Hashem said to Moshe, "Behold, I shall rain down for you food from heaven. Let the people go out and pick each day's portion on its day, so that I can test them, whether they will follow my teaching or not." Now, how did this work? First of all, we know that the Israelites survived on the remnants of the dough and the matzah that they brought with them out of Egypt for 31 days, from the 15th of Nisan till the 15th day of the month of Iyar. On the 15th day of the month of Iyar, Israel journeyed from Elim to Alush. It was a Sunday that day. And that morning they still ate of the dough, and it was finished. It was that evening that they began to complain. And really, they should have come to Moshe and asked him to pray for mercy for them. Instead, they complained against both Moshe and Aaron, and they said, "Why did you bring us to this desert to die, if only we died during the 3 days of darkness?" And they took their kids and they thrust them up in Moshe's face, and they said, "What arrangements, Ben Amram, have you made for this little tyke? What arrangements have you made for his livelihood?" And they said to each other, "Remember those great meat meals that we ate while we were in Egypt with all the side dishes?" The Medrash asks, they ate meat in Egypt? They were slaving away with bricks and mortar. They saw the Egyptians eating away and they didn't get any. But it's like a poor person who says in front of other people, "You know, I had such a nice meal the other day at Bill Gates' house or at Warren Buffett's house," when actually they've never even spoken with him. But it's just to try to get someone else to give them. They really should have come to Hashem themselves. But still in all, Hashem said, "You know, they did it their way, and I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to reveal myself to them immediately, without waiting." Now, even though this complaining was really like a sin, because they still didn't really believe in him after everything, after all the miracles of the Exodus and coming this far. But even so, God said, "They're my children, they're my loved ones, the descendants of Abraham, my family." So he said, "Tell Israel that in the morning you'll have bread. It will come down from heaven, from a place outside your control. And I'm only going to give you enough for each day so that you will realize that you are dependent on me. That by depending on me for your sustenance, you should really believe in me and really follow my Torah. Go tell them to gather an omer," that's a specific amount, "each day, and on Friday, on Erev Shabbat, to prepare for Shabbat, a double portion will fall." So this omer, it's a dry measure. It's like the size of a bundle of grain, and it's also a tenth of an ephah. That's another measurement, dry measure in Hebrew. And in modern terms, it's basically between 2.16 to 4.3 liter, depending on the interpretation. And this omer is basically the exact amount that a person needs every day. Moshe and Aaron said to them, "Just exactly what are you thinking by standing and complaining about us? We're just the messengers. We're not the ones who actually took you out of Egypt. God himself took you out, and in the evening he will make it clear to you that he's the one who took you out, and in the morning you will see his great sovereignty. In the evening he'll set a table for you in this desert, gather quail and give you meat, and in the morning he'll give you bread from heaven," something never seen before, a new creation. So in the evening they ate the quail, and in the morning they gathered the manna. How did this work? Our sages tell us that in the evenings God brought a wind from the sea and brought all the quail, and so much quail arrived at the camp that it was 2 amot, 2 handbreadths high, off the ground, all around the camp, so that everyone could gather without even making any effort. No need even to bend over. It was like opposite the heart. And in the mornings, they gathered the manna. Now, how did this work? A wind came first from the north, swept the desert floor, then rains came and softened the ground, and then dew came up from the ground. And the wind blowing through the dew made it like a table of gold. And upon this, the manna fell so that it wouldn't become soiled from the ground. And then another layer of dew came up again and enveloped the manna from above so that flies and crawly things wouldn't go on it. It was like it was presented in a beautiful box. And according to the Midrash, the heavenly angels ground it, and it came down in small kernels like hail. But it was not hot. It was like hot bread. And it came down gently, and it didn't make a sound. And the Torah says its appearance was as coriander seeds in stalk, white as pearls. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel taught, look how precious are the children of Israel to their Father in heaven, that for their sake he actually changed the order of creation. Usually bread comes from the earth and dew from heaven. Now he brought them bread from heaven and dew came up from the ground. And actually, on account of this, Israel has the custom of spreading out 2 tablecloths on Shabbat and holidays, one on the table and the other over the bread, as a remembrance of the way the manna was served in the desert, which had dew beneath it and above it. So they see all this, and they wonder aloud to each other, Manhu, what is it? And Moshe told them, this is the bread that was saved for you in heaven since the very 6 days of creation. And now you are being given it to eat. And its commandment was to gather the measure of an omer for each person in the household. No more and no less, but the exact amount. Moshe told them, Hashem commands you, take 1 omer per person, and don't leave anything over to the morning. Even someone who has 5 children isn't going to say, what will we eat tomorrow? Each morning, this idyllic life, they would recite the morning Shema and their morning prayer, and then a man would simply walk out of his tent and gather up his livelihood for himself and for that of his household. And the rest, whatever was left outside, was unclaimed, would melt in the sun. And our sages tell us that the distance of where the manna was placed depended on a person's personal attributes. Those who were really very righteous, it came down for them literally at the entrance to their home. Those who were kind of on middle ground, they had to go out and they had to go and gather it up. And those who were really not so connected, they had to really make more of a schlep to get it. But every morning, all of Israel would go out and gather it for the first 4 hours of the day before the sun rose too high and caused it to melt. And when the sun would shine upon it, it would begin to warm and run, and rivulets would flow from it, turning to streams, flowing to the Mediterranean. And all sorts of animals would come and drink from those waters. And, says the Midrash, when the nations would come and hunt those animals and eat them, they would ultimately be tasting the flavor of the manna. And in this way, some of its goodness reached them as well. Now, of course, when it came to preparing for Shabbat, some of the manna was hidden away, and that didn't get wormy, and it also tasted different. It had the taste of Shabbat. And when they saw that it wasn't coming down on Shabbat, some were afraid and said to Moshe, maybe it's not going to come back again tomorrow. And Moshe said, don't worry. Today it's not coming, tomorrow it will return. And every morning it would fall, descend, and multiply, and rise up from the ground and increase until, says the Midrash, all the kings of the east and the west would see it. And this is the secret of the verse in Psalms 23, you have set a table before me opposite my enemies. So this remarkable food accompanied them throughout the 40 years in the desert, and after the tabernacle was erected in the 2nd year, with the tent of meeting and the ark, Moshe told them, Hashem commands you that you put aside 1 omer of the manna in front of the ark for perpetuity, so that all future generations will see how Hashem fed you in the desert. Moshe said, this is the thing that Hashem has commanded. A full omer of it shall be a safekeeping for your generations, so that they will see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I took you out of Egypt. Moshe said to Aaron, take 1 jar and put a full omer of manna into it, place it before Hashem for a safekeeping for your generations, as Hashem commanded Moshe. Aaron placed it before the ark of the testimony for a safekeeping. And indeed, throughout all the years of the tabernacle, and throughout all the years of the first temple, this jar of manna stood as a testimony next to the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. And when the Ark of the Covenant was hidden, and we believe that we possess the knowledge of exactly where the location of the Ark of the Covenant is, and that it will be retrieved for the building of the third temple, when the Ark was hidden in the time of King Josiah, before the destruction of the first temple, that original jar of manna was also placed in the same chamber that houses the Ark of the Covenant. So the manna came down for Israel for 40 years, until Moshe passed away at Arvot Moav, at the entrance to the land of Israel. And indeed, in the book of Joshua, chapter 5, we read that when all the nation had finished being circumcised, they remained in their place in the camp until they had recuperated. Hashem said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the disgrace of Egypt from upon you." He named that place Gilgal till this day. The children of Israel encamped at Gilgal and performed the Pesach offering on the 14th day of the month in the evening in the plains of Jericho. They ate from the grain of the land on the day after the Pesach offering, matzot and roasted grain on this very day. The verse continues and says, the manna stopped the following day when they ate from the grain of the land. There was no longer any manna for the children of Israel. They ate from the grain of the land of Canaan that year. So in one fell swoop, upon entering into the land from that day, as is described in Joshua chapter 5, children of Israel went from saying this blessing over the manna, who brings forth bread from heaven, according to the Ben Ish Chai, the version of the blessing was, Hamamter lechem min hashamayim, who rains down bread from heaven. So they went from saying that blessing over the bread to Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, from blessing Hashem, he who brings forth bread from the earth. What a tremendous transition that is, going from receiving heavenly bread straight from the hands of God to eating of the grain of the land, processing, creating, baking it ourselves. Perhaps in understanding, attempting to understand this transition, we can a little bit more understand the secret of the significance of saving some of this manna in a jar as a testimony. What was the significance of saving some so that every subsequent generation in perpetuity would be able to see this? Is this some sort of icon or relic? Where do we find an example similar of leaving something over like that, a manifestation of a heavenly miracle? If we understand this transition from heavenly bread to earthly bread, we can understand the significance of the commandment of the jar of manna that was kept as a testimony. It's like when two people are in love and they have this memento. There was something there at a certain moment that was the highest moment in our relationship, or even better, the first gift. It's like some sort of object of love, like a way of remembering the good times, or the highest, or at least the most revealed time of a relationship with a certain message. And the message is, this love that was manifest will never cease and never stop. And if only we would be able to realize that behind everything, behind all the disguises and the trappings, what's called the levushim, the garments of everything that exists, is this level of Hashem's love for His people, which is completely unsullied. So through this object, which is something to focus on, it's to serve as an anchor. It's a reminder of this feeling of love, that even in the trappings, even in the garments, even in all the casings, the love of the giver should be recognized. We think that we're creating. We think that we're bringing bread from the earth. But that level of miracle is identical to the level of miracle of Hashem bringing us bread from heaven. And even when the manna stops, and Hashem wants to give them bread from the earth, through their complete acquisition of their life, because actually, that's a higher level. The bread that we have to create and see Hashem's hand in that is a better grasp of what our relationship with Hashem really is than was the bread from heaven. But even in the bread that we create, the giver, Hashem's love, never ceases. So placing the container as a testimony is a reminder that even when we receive Hashem's blessing through disguises, as if we ourselves are preparing this food, as if there's something that we can do in this world that's devoid of Hashem's hand, and even if we don't remember to look every time deeper to the one who is giving, still that romance, that moment when we realize, when we saw so clearly what that love is, it's unbroken. And even if it's hidden, it never ceases, because everything that we receive, even if we think it's our own efforts, everything is a gift from heaven and a sign of His love.